When Hollywood star Jim Carrey, the comedic legend turned reflective visionary, was forcibly removed from The Late Show with Stephen Colbert, the entertainment world stopped in its tracks. What should have been a lively promotional segment for Carrey's latest soul-stirring film spiraled into a blistering confrontation, exposing a side of Colbert that shatters his polished persona as late-night's witty intellectual. In a brazen display of arrogance, Colbert needled Carrey with cutting remarks, transforming a platform for dialogue into a stage for hostility. This isn't just a celebrity feud. It's a raw glimpse into the underbelly of late-night power plays. Stick around as we dive into the shocking details. And make sure to subscribe and drop your thoughts in the comments, because this story unveils the true Stephen Colbert like never before. According to insiders, the tension was palpable long before the cameras started rolling. Carrey arrived at the Ed Sullivan Theater in a reflective mood, eager to discuss his new film, a deeply personal project exploring themes of identity and redemption. Jim was warm, engaged, chatting with the crew about everything from art to philosophy, a stagehand recalled. He was excited to share something meaningful. Carrey's team had coordinated with the show's producers to focus on the film's message, and he spent the pre-show prep cracking lighthearted jokes while connecting with staff. But the atmosphere shifted when Colbert arrived, visibly distracted and curt. Sources say he barely acknowledged Carrey during their brief pre-show meeting, instead griping to his team about the segment's runtime. Stephen seemed irritated from the jump, a production assistant disclosed. He was muttering about Jim's weird spiritual phase and how he didn't want to deal with it. This dismissive attitude set the stage for a collision that no one saw coming. When the show began, the audience picked up on the unease immediately. Colbert's introduction of Carrey was oddly tepid, more perfunctory than celebratory, lacking the warmth reserved for a star of Carrey's caliber. As Carrey bounded onto the stage, his infectious energy filling the theater, Colbert remained seated, offering a stiff smile and a quick handshake that felt more like a formality. The contrast was stark. Carrey vibrant and open. Colbert, detached and poised for a fight. The interview kicked off with standard questions about Carrey's film, but Colbert's tone quickly turned sharp. Instead of engaging with the project's themes, he veered into mockery. So, Jim, this movie's all about what? Finding yourself? Kind of a departure from rubber faces and pet detectives, huh? The jab was subtle but pointed, and the audience laughed nervously. Carrey, unfazed, leaned into it with a grin. Life's a journey, Stephen. I've done the masks. Now I'm exploring what's underneath. You should try it sometime. Colbert's smile tightened, his eyes flashing with irritation. Oh, I'm good, thanks, he shot back. But seriously, you've been on this whole enlightenment kick lately. Is that just a midlife crisis or what? The question landed like a jab, and Carrey's grin faded slightly. It's called growth, Stephen, he said, his voice steady. You hit a point where you want to dig deeper. Ask the big questions. That's what this film's about. The audience clapped, but Colbert's expression darkened, as if annoyed Carrey hadn't taken the bait. Insiders later noted that Colbert seemed intent on rattling his guest. He doesn't like when guests go off script, a crew member explained. Jim's sincerity threw him, and Stephen started poking to get a reaction. That's exactly what happened next. Colbert shifted gears, bringing up Carrey's past struggles with mental health, a topic Carrey has addressed openly but selectively. You've talked about some dark times, Jim, Colbert said, his tone dripping with faux concern. This movie's pretty heavy. You sure you're not just working out your issues on screen? The audience fell quiet, sensing the shift from playful to invasive. Carrey leaned back, his eyes narrowing slightly. I think art's a way to process life, Stephen, he said, his voice calm but firm. I've been honest about my journey because it helps people. But I'm here to talk about the film, not to be your therapy session. The rebuke was gentle but pointed, and the audience applauded, some cheering. Colbert's forced chuckle didn't mask his irritation. Wow, okay, touchy, he said, leaning forward. Just trying to keep it real, Jim. You know, like you do. The tension was now palpable. Carrey tried to steer things back to his film, sharing a poignant story about its inspiration, but Colbert cut him off. Yeah, that's deep, but let's talk about something fun. Like, what's with all the painting? You're out there playing Picasso now. The condescension was blatant, and Carrey's jaw tightened. Painting is how I express what words can't, he said. It's not a hobby. It's a lifeline. You ever try creating something from your soul, Stephen? The audience erupted, but Colbert's face flushed, his control slipping as the segment teetered on the edge of chaos. The commercial break hit like a lifeline, but it did little to douse the fire. Backstage, Carrey's team was in a frenzy, urging him to walk away before things escalated further. Carrey, however, sat calmly, his eyes fixed on some distant point as if weighing his next move. Jim was pissed but focused, a publicist later shared. He wasn't going to let Colbert steamroll him. Across the stage, Colbert was huddled with his producer, his gestures sharp and voice low but heated. Crew members overheard him dismissing concerns, insisting he could handle Carrey. The audience, still reeling from the charged exchange, buzzed with nervous energy as the countdown to go live loomed. When the cameras rolled again, Colbert tried to reset with a forced quip about the show's band, but the laughter was thin, the room still heavy with tension. Carrey sat upright, his earlier warmth replaced by a steely resolve that seemed to unnerve Colbert. The host pivoted back to Carrey, his tone now a mix of sarcasm and challenge. "All right, Jim, let's lighten things up," he said, smirking. "You're this big philosopher now, but you've had some, let's say, colorful moments, like that time you went off about award shows being meaningless. Still feel that way?" The question was a trap, referencing a years-old comment Carrey had made about Hollywood's self-congratulation. Carrey didn't flinch. "I think authenticity matters more than trophies, Stephen," he said, his voice steady. "Awards are nice, but they don't define the work. My film's about real human struggle, not red carpet fluff." The audience clapped, but Colbert leaned forward undeterred. "Sure, but you've cashed plenty of those meaningless checks, right? Kind of hypocritical to bite the hand that feeds you." The jab was sharp, and Carr's eyes flashed with controlled anger. "I've earned my place, Stephen," he said, his tone low but firm. "I'm grateful for the opportunities, but I don't owe anyone my silence. If I see nonsense, I call it out. That's not hypocrisy, it's honesty." The audience erupted, some cheering, but Colbert's smile was gone, replaced by a thin-lipped scowl. "Honesty, huh?" he shot back. "Is that what you call those bizarre interviews you've been giving? Because some people think you're just chasing headlines." The personal dig stung, and Carrey leaned forward, his presence commanding the stage. "Some people or you, Stephen?" he asked, his voice cutting through the room. "I share what's real for me. If that makes you uncomfortable, that's your problem, not mine." The audience roared and Colbert's face reddened, his grip on the desk tightening. "Oh, I'm not uncomfortable," he said, his voice tight. "I just think it's convenient how you play the tortured artist when it suits you. What's next? Writing poetry in a cave." The mockery was relentless, and Carrey's patience visibly thinned. "You know, Stephen, I came here to talk about a film that means something to me," he said, his voice rising slightly. "But you're more interested in cheap shots than a real conversation. Why is that?" The question hung in the air, and the audience fell silent, sensing the shift from tense to combustible. Colbert tried to laugh it off, but it came out strained. "Cheap shots. Come on, Jim. This is a comedy show. You used to know how to take a joke." "Jokes are supposed to be funny," Carrey fired back, his eyes locked on Colbert. "What you're doing is trying to tear down someone who's bearing their soul. That's not comedy. It's cowardice." The audience gasped, then erupted in applause, some standing in support. Colbert's composure cracked, his face flushing deeper. "Cowardice?" he snapped, leaning forward aggressively. "You're sitting on my stage, acting like you're above it all. Maybe you're the one who can't handle a little pushback." Carrey didn't budge. "Pushback's fine, Stephen. Bullying isn't. You're not asking questions. You're swinging. And I'm not here to be your punching bag." The room was electric, the audience hanging on every word. Colbert, now visibly rattled, tried to regain control. "Bullying? That's rich coming from a guy who's made a career out of yelling in people's faces," he said, referencing Carr's high-energy comedic roles. Carr's jaw clenched, but he kept his voice even. "I've spent my life making people laugh, Stephen. What have you done lately besides smugly judging your guests?" The rebuke was a gut punch, and Colbert's eyes widened, his control slipping further. The producer offstage was frantically signaling to cut, but Colbert ignored it, leaning closer to Carrey. "You want to talk about judging? Let's talk about your so-called art. Half the industry thinks you're faking this whole deep thinker act to stay relevant." The accusation was vicious, and Carrey stood up, his presence filling the stage. "I'm done, Stephen," he said, his voice booming. "You want to play dirty? Do it with someone else. I came here to share something real, not to feed your ego." The audience roared, chanting, "Jim! Jim!" as the director scrambled to cut to commercial. The commercial break was a whirlwind of chaos. Backstage, Carr's team was in full damage control mode, pleading with him to exit before the situation spiraled further. Carrey, however, stood firm, his expression a mix of defiance and disgust. "I'm not letting him win," he reportedly told his publicist, his voice low but resolute. Crew members, some visibly shaken by Colbert's unraveling, whispered among themselves, with one sound tech admitting, "I've never seen Stephen lose it like that." On the other side, Colbert was cornered by his producer, who was practically begging him to apologize or pivot to safer ground. Colbert, his face flushed, waved off the advice, muttering, "He's not going to make me look weak." When the show resumed, the studio was a powder keg. The audience, now fully invested, leaned forward, their earlier excitement replaced by a tense anticipation. Colbert, his smile forced and brittle, tried to play off the earlier clash with a weak joke about lively debates, but the room barely responded. Carrey sat back in his chair, his eyes locked on Colbert, radiating an intensity that seemed to rattle the host. "All right, Jim," Colbert said, his voice tinged with barely concealed venom. "Let's try this again. Your film's all about redemption, right? Kind of ironic given some of the messes you've left behind in Hollywood." The accusation was a low blow, vaguely referencing old tabloid stories about Carr's personal life. Carr's face hardened, but he kept his cool. "If you've got something to say, Stephen, say it," he challenged, his voice steady. "Don't hide behind innuendo like a gossip columnist." The audience murmured, and Colbert's smirk faltered. "I'm just saying," he backpedaled. "You've had your share of drama. People talk, Jim. Like, what's the deal with you and certain co-stars? Trouble seems to follow you." The vagueness was deliberate, designed to provoke without committing to specifics. Carrey leaned forward, his gaze unflinching. "People talk because people like you give them a microphone," he said, his voice cutting through the silence. "I've made mistakes, owned them, and moved on. What's your excuse for dragging up garbage instead of talking about the work I'm here for?" The audience erupted, some cheering, others gasping at the directness. Colbert's face twitched, his control slipping further. "Oh, come on, Jim," he snapped. "Don't act like you're some saint. You've been playing the victim card for years, and it's getting old." The personal attack was relentless, and Carrey's patience visibly frayed. "Victim card?" he said, his voice rising with controlled fury. "I've spent my life fighting to be real in an industry that chews up authenticity. You think you're clever, Stephen, but all you're doing is proving you're scared of anyone who doesn't play your game." The audience roared, and Colbert's eyes widened, his hands gripping the desk. "Scared?" he shot back, his voice cracking. "I'm not the one dodging questions. Maybe if you weren't so busy preaching, you'd see how ridiculous you sound." Carrey didn't blink. "I'm not dodging anything," he said, his voice low and piercing. "I'm asking you to do your job. Ask me about the film, the art, the ideas. Or is that too hard for you?" The challenge was a dare, and the audience leaned in, hanging on every word. Colbert, now visibly unhinged, laughed harshly. My job is to cut through the BS, Jim. Like your whole "I found myself" routine. Half the people watching think you're having a breakdown on live TV." The insult was vicious, and Carrey stood again, his presence dominating the stage. "You know what, Stephen?" he said, his voice booming. "I came here to share something that matters. You turned it into a sideshow because you can't handle a real conversation. I'm done playing your clown." The audience exploded, chanting, "Jim! Jim!" as Carrey turned to leave. Colbert, panic flashing in his eyes, stood up, shouting over the noise. "Yeah, walk away, Jim. That's what you do when it gets tough, right? Run back to your easel." Carrey paused, turning back slowly, his eyes blazing. "I'm not running, Stephen," he said, his voice carrying an eerie calm. "I'm choosing to leave a stage that's beneath me. You're not a host. You're a heckler with a desk." The words landed like a thunderclap, and the audience went wild, some standing in ovation. Colbert, his face pale, tried to fire back. "Beneath you. This is my show, Jim. You don't get to." But Carrey cut him off, stepping closer. "Your show's a platform, Stephen. You could have used it to lift people up. Instead, you tore me down. That's not power. It's pathetic." The producer, now on stage, tried to intervene, waving frantically at the director to cut. The audience was on its feet, a mix of cheers and stunned silence filling the theater. Carrey, unflinching, held Colbert's gaze for a moment longer before turning to exit. The cameras cut to commercial just as Colbert, visibly shaken, slumped back into his chair, the weight of the moment crashing down. The final commercial break was a breaking point. Backstage, the air crackled with chaos as Carrey's team rallied around him, urging him to leave the theater before security could escalate things further. Carrey, his jaw set and eyes burning, shook his head. I walk out on my terms, he said, his voice a low growl of resolve. Crew members, some openly siding with Carrey, hovered nearby, one grip muttering, Stephen's done for. After this, in the production booth, Colbert's team was in meltdown mode with the executive producer barking orders to salvage the broadcast. Colbert himself stood alone near the stage, his face ashen, ignoring his staff's pleas to issue an on-air apology. He's the one who needs to apologize, he reportedly snapped, though his trembling hands betrayed his bravado. When the show returned, Colbert was back at his desk, his smile a brittle mask. Carrey was gone, his chair empty, a stark symbol of the clash that had just unfolded. The audience, still buzzing, was quieter now, their energy tinged with shock. Colbert tried to pivot, launching into a monologue about upcoming segments, but his voice cracked and the jokes landed flat. Well, folks, that was spirited, he said, forcing a laugh. But the room's silence was deafening. Offstage, security had intercepted Carr's team near the exit at Colbert's insistence, demanding they wait for a discussion. Carrey, unfazed, faced the guards head-on. Discussion's over, he said, his voice calm but commanding. Step aside. The head guard hesitated, glancing at the producer who'd rushed backstage to defuse the situation. Mr. Carrey, please, let's just talk this out, the producer pleaded. But Carrey held up a hand. I gave your host a chance to talk. He chose to attack. We're done here. His authority was undeniable, and the guards parted, some visibly reluctant to challenge him. As Carr's team moved toward the exit, Colbert appeared, his tie loosened, his face a mix of desperation and rage. Jim, hold on, he called, his voice strained. This got out of hand. Let's fix this man-to-man. Carrey stopped, turning slowly, his gaze piercing. Fix it, he said, his voice low and deliberate. You don't fix what you broke on purpose, Stephen. You mocked my work, my life, my truth. All for a few cheap laughs. That's not a mistake. That's who you are. The words cut deep, and Colbert flinched, his attempt at conciliation crumbling. Come on, Jim. It's just TV, he said, his tone pleading. You know how this works. We push, we prod. It's the game. Carrey stepped closer, his presence towering. It's not a game when you hurt people, Stephen. You had a chance to elevate the conversation, to connect with your audience. Instead, you played bully. Own it. Colbert's face re-eamed, but he had no retort. The producer, sensing disaster, tried to intervene, but Carrey was already moving, his team in lockstep. As they reached the exit, a young PA approached, her voice shaky. Mr. Carrey, I'm sorry for what happened. Thank you for standing up. Carrey paused, his expression softening. Sometimes you have to draw a line, he said simply, then pushed through the doors into the night. The aftermath was seismic. Clips of the confrontation flooded social media, amassing tens of millions of views within hours. Colbert exposed and Jim Carrey trended globally as fans and insiders dissected the meltdown. Anonymous crew members leaked stories of Colbert's backstage tirades and his habit of targeting guests who challenged his control, painting a picture of a host unraveling under pressure. The network scrambled, issuing a vague statement about reviewing the incident, but rumors swirled of emergency meetings and potential suspensions. Carrey, ever the enigma, stayed silent, letting his actions speak. His team issued a brief note. Jim appreciates the support and is focused on his art. Fans flooded his platforms with praise, hailing his courage in confronting Colbert's hostility. In Hollywood, doing a Carrey became shorthand for standing tall against arrogance, a nod to his unyielding integrity. Colbert's show, meanwhile, bled viewers with publicists quietly pulling A-listers from future bookings, wary of his volatile streak. Colbert's attempt at damage control, a tepid social media post claiming passions ran high, backfired, drowned out by comments championing Carrey and slamming Colbert's deflection. The mask had slipped, revealing a host who thrived on dominance but buckled when challenged. The clash was a stark reminder that in an industry of facades, authenticity cuts through, and true strength lies in standing for what's right, no matter the stage. What do you think of this explosive showdown between Jim Carrey and Stephen Colbert? Was Colbert's behavior unforgivable, or did Carrey overreact? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Subscribe to Shoaib Buzzder Stories for more unfiltered Hollywood scoops, and hit that notification bell to never miss a video. We'll see you in the next one, only on Shoaib Buzzder Stories.